to A Peek Inside Gator Football. Allie Peek here, joined by a very special guest, Heisman Trophy winner and national champion Danny Wuerffel. Danny, thanks for coming on. This is going to be so awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for all the great work you do covering Gator football.
Okay, so as a Heisman winner and a national champion, what leadership lessons did you learn at Florida that you still use in your life today?
Oh man. I mean, one of the reasons I love football is for that question. I think you learn a lot. In fact, a lot of in the early days, if you study the history of intercollegiate kind of athletics, part of it was intentionally to teach young people lessons they couldn't learn in a classroom. And so I think, I mean, just the ability to grind. I just wrote an article today about perseverance and resilience and how important that is in life and business and leadership and family. And thinking back to that game where, I got knocked down 32 times against Florida State. We lost in 1996, and then we got to play them again and beat them for the national title. So, you talk about resilience, you talk about interacting with people. It's interesting as a quarterback, you're a leader,
Mhm.
but you don't really have authority. That's a coach's role. So your leadership has to come from your ability to persuade, to inspire. And at the end of the day, I think the best leaders lean on that, even though they also have authority as well. And so I think that the ability of working with teams, bringing people together that are very different. Football teams are often some of the most diverse groups of anywhere, and they're amazing because you come together. Lots of lessons I could keep going.
You mentioned the locker room being different, and that's something I was discussing with my husband. Some of the questions I wanted to ask you right before this, and he said, Allie, the culture in a locker room is so hard to describe for anyone that has not been in it, and it's really not like anything that you experience really anywhere else. And so, you obviously are incredibly principled. How did you know, I guess, commingle in a locker room, create relationships with all of these players that have different backgrounds, different beliefs, come from completely different mindsets than you without compromising who you are as a person?
I think the beauty is it's such a diverse group of people, but you have such a common goal together.
Mhm.
And so when you can rally around what you have in common more than what makes you different, that's beautiful. That's to me a lesson for our society as well. But I think, I've been a part of some great cultures in locker rooms. I've been a part of some bad ones. The difference in a locker room after a big win versus a big loss is a very dynamic, noticeable difference. I think we had a lot of great people that cared about each other. And, I remember we developed a game, we called it stickball, where we took tape and made it into a ball. And then we had some kind of stick, and it was almost like pitching and hitting. And, back in the day, Allie, before all this NIL and where they spoiled everybody, like we only got a certain number of Gatorades a week. And then after that, we only had water. So we would barter and bet our Gatorades in this stickball game. And, you had guys like James Bates and, Lawrence Wright and just others that were just phenomenal leaders of people and made things fun. And so, we went through a lot, but we were able to stick together.
Well, you will be happy to know that your stickball legacy lives on because that is the game my husband has mentioned and my brother has mentioned.
All right, there you
So
go.
you
Setting traditions.
setting some traditions. So when you led your teams, how did you balance leading by example and being versus, being a vocal leader? And what advice would you give to a young quarterback stepping into that role?
I think I think one, you've got to really be genuine, and so you kind of need to understand yourself and lead out of what makes you tick. I'm a very good encourager in life, but I'm not a great sheriff. And so I think for me to be more encouraging, inspiring, I think leading by example was sort of the traits I led on. Whereas there may have been some times I needed to or could have been a little more vocal. Whereas someone like I think Tim Tebow is much more vocal and much more oratory. I didn't have the promise speech that he had, but so I think everyone has to kind of lead out of that. In fact, I'm working with a high school quarterback right now who's just a wonderful young man, but he's very kind and very shy. And the coach was telling him, his high school coach was telling him he should yell at the receivers when they drop a pass, and he's just like, I don't know if I should do that. And I'm like, well, I feel you there. And so I think you've got to be genuine in who you are. And there was a few times where I was pretty vocal, but I think there's just you can't be who you're not, or then you become not who you are.
Yeah. Looking back, was there a moment at Florida that tested your leadership just absolutely the most? And how did you grow from it?
I think one of the toughest times for us was, I referenced it earlier, when we lost to Florida State. So in 1996, we were number one pretty much, I think, all year. I was a front runner for the Heisman. We beat Peyton Manning in Tennessee. I mean, we beat everybody, and it wasn't even close. And then the last game of the regular season, we lose to Florida State. And so, in a sense, nowadays you'd still get in the playoffs, if you were 10-1 or 11-1. But back then, you drop out of the top two, you're out of it.
Yeah.
Like, you really are out of it. And so I think the mood with the players, even with the coaches, was so disappointing. We'd already won 3 SECs, and we'd already played for national titles. So, like, the national title was the deal, and we were out of it. But we were playing Alabama for an SEC, and we had a game the next week. And that's when I remember specifically some of the guys, James Bates, me, Lawrence Wright, and a few others, kind of rallying that team, in some ways even before the coaches, I think, got rallied to get our act together. And then a series of unthinkable events happened. Nebraska lost. We beat Alabama.
Notre
Arizona
Dame
State
and
lost.
Ohio State.
Yes. And so all of a sudden, the only undefeated team left was Florida State, and we got a chance to play them again and beat them. So that, when all things looked like they were lost, to still take the next best step as a group, put us in a position to get the first national title for Florida.
Your faith has always been central to your story. How did you lean on it during the pressures of that national championship season? And like you said, when these stumbles happened.
So, I think in multiple ways, I think my faith led me to some people, and the people helped keep me very grounded. I remember throwing 6 touchdowns on a Saturday, and I was having dinner at a family's house on Sunday after church. And I got up to leave, and the mom's like, why aren't you picking up your plate like you always do? You're no different than the rest of us. It was like, oh, yeah, a reminder, no matter how great you're doing. So I think the faith led me to people. I think that a big piece for me was, there's a lot of pressure going into my senior year, and there's a lot of voices. And it's probably not like today with all the social media, but I mean, magazines, newspapers, TVs, it was still crazy.
Mhm.
And my faith sort of led me to say, I need to really be playing for an audience of one. Like, at the end of the day, one opinion matters, and it's not Coach Spurrier's. It's actually, how am I representing and playing in this space? And so there's multiple examples, I think, where there were some really tense moments. One of the greatest plays, I think, of my career, and a defining moment for Florida, was we were playing Tennessee in 1996. It was raining. It was the game of the century. More people were at that stadium that day than had ever gathered for a college football game. And it was pouring rain, and it was fourth and, I think, 13 on the opening drive, and Spurrier goes for it. And I had this vision. I won't go all into it, of something that just gave me so much peace in that moment. And then I went back and was supposed to throw a 15-yard in route for the first down, but the safety crept. So I just threw the post to Reedell for the touchdown, and that led to 4 straight touchdowns in the first half, and we win that game. And so I think really that sense that at the end of the day, I was really focused that my identity doesn't come from throwing a touchdown or interception, or whether we win or lose, but I have an identity that was established, long before, and will last long after. And that was largely due to my faith.
You played for Coach Spurrier, obviously, as you have mentioned, and he's got a fiery, competitive, somewhat irreverent humor personality. What was your relationship with him like past the X's and O's?
Yeah. Well, I think there's probably nobody in my life that's changed the trajectory of my life more than playing for Steve Spurrier and the success that we had. Um, he's very funny. If you've been around him, he's a very funny person. He's always finding things to poke fun of, and watching film with him is absolutely hilarious because he'll find a fan in the stands and you don't even know who he's looking at, and he'll fast forward. Or I remember there's one where Uga jumped up and then fell over, and so he just would fast forward that. And it's like he's very funny, but he's also was tough. Like he was a very old school, really, really pushed you, especially as a quarterback and the receivers, probably more than most. And so, there are a lot of times where, Shane Matthews or me or, any of us there were like, man, this isn't always the most pleasant experience, but he was pushing you to be the best that you can be. And then, now he's like the grandfather. If you think about being a parent and how difficult it is to raise your kids, and then you get to be a grandparent where you kind of just get to spoil them, and it's a lot easier and more fun. He's a wonderful grand coach, and it's wonderful to get to see him and be around him, and it's delightful. Him and Jerry, of course.
Was there a particular lesson or moment with coach that shaped you the most as a player and maybe even as a person?
I think it's probably a combination of a lot of things that he embodied and taught. He had this really unique ability to mix two qualities that you usually don't see in one person. So, like, on one hand, the detail of running a route, uh, and the detail of the quarterback steps and the face position and the timing was so intricate and so specific. It's like more detailed and structured than anything else I'd ever seen, even going to the NFL. But then also he had this ability to be like, oh shucks, okay, well if they're doing this, you're just going to draw a play in the dirt, and like you're the bottle cap and you're the stick, and you're going to go out there. And he could make adjustments. This ability of being, the word that he would use is flexible. You got to be flexible, Danny. And most coaches, I think, are either overly analytical. Like I played for a coach, and we saw a great opportunity to make an adjustment for a game. Like we had a whole week, and he was more like, well, I need to see that studied over a year and a meta analysis about how that worked. And it was like, my gosh, it's just like, it'll work.
Right.
And then other coaches are like, very, very flexible and dynamic and great player coaches, but like they don't have the detail structure it needs to be successful on every play. And so I think his ability to combine those things has inspired me far beyond just football. Like, how can I be structured? How can I be flexible? How do I balance those two things in life?
Those are good life lessons. If you had to sum up Coach Spurrier's leadership style in one story that maybe only you or somebody that was in his quarterback room could tell, what would it be?
Well, the joke would be when I threw an interception early and thought the receiver ran the wrong route, and he actually came to me and said, don't worry, it's not your fault." He goes, "It's my fault for putting you in there." So that's the joke about it. But let's see, it's something about his leadership style that nobody would know. I mean, he was, um, he just the ability. I felt like um, the documentary that they did on him, just this idea where I think the name of the documentary was The Believer, and just the some would say swagger, some would say confidence, opponents would say cockiness, but the belief he had that if you could get to the right play, you were going to have a very successful play. Like that was just unbelievably high. And like we believe that too, and whether he could predict the defense and call it, or in many cases teach you how, if you saw a defense that wasn't what he expected, you had to change the play. It wasn't like you had the option, but like you were constantly looking for the right, better play. And it wasn't like some offenses where he calls a play and if you don't like it, he tells you exactly what play to check to. It was like the entire playbook's open. You know it. You see the defense. You know what I think, and get to it. Now, of course, it's on you if it works or not. But that was part of the fun.
As someone who has been close to the program for decades, how do you view the way that Coach Napier is trying to rebuild Florida?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the whole landscape of this thing has changed a lot in the past several years. You know, uh, it's a lot would say, it's kind of becoming like a bit of an NFL where guys are getting paid. And the reality though is whether you're in the NFL or whether you're in college, and there's a lot of those things happening. At the end of the day, you still have to get a group of people to come together and work together and believe in each other. And my sense is that he's one of the best, if not the best, in the business at doing that. A great example would be, the more you're in an NIL age, the more there's a transfer portal, the harder it is to build culture.
Yeah.
And if you lose, it's really hard to build culture. And so I would say if you look at last year's season and in that midpoint and then going into the Texas game, I can't imagine, if you'd asked me to bet money on any team regrouping at that point to have a positive ending, I would have given it very little chance. But I think that's a testimony to the character of the people he's brought in, the way they invest in people, the way they care for people. And so I think from a culture building standpoint, he's absolutely crushing it.
And that culture really is, the basis for any foundation of sustained success, but particularly at Florida. From your perspective, what is the biggest challenge that Coach Napier, but really any coach at Florida, faces when they step into that head coaching role?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest problem they face is Spurrier and Urban Meyer's legacy. I mean, it's like, there was a time where, Florida would won 7 games, people would have been really, really happy. And then Spurrier comes and starts racking up SECs. Urban and Tebow come in and start winning SECs and national titles. And so now it's just our expectations are high as they should be. I think, Coach Napier came in at just, a really interesting time. He's had tremendous success in his career as a recruiter and the team that they've put together. And I just think that those initial NIL years, some people would say the Gators were late to jumping on that train, but I would also say the early people were taking a big risk because it actually wasn't fully legal what some of them were doing, and you
Sure.
didn't know if you were going to get hammered. So I don't fault us for that. I think as that unfolded, the groups got together and now started doing a great job with the collectives and all that. So I think that's picked back up, and you've seen the success they've had in recruiting over the past couple of years. And so, I think this is a very exciting year. It's a big year for him. It's the fourth year. We've got the best roster we've had, and we're all really excited.
You mentioned, some of that talent acquisition and recruiting that Napier's done so well at, and probably the very biggest name that he's landed is, of course, DJ Lagway. And you've been around some of the best quarterbacks. You are one of the best quarterbacks in Florida football history. What about Lagway excites you about the future of the program?
Well, there's so many things about this young man that are impressive. I mean, you just one, you look at him and you're not sure if you're looking at a linebacker or a quarterback. I mean, he's a very large, strong, powerful athlete. He's got a tremendous throwing motion and arm. He's got, typically when you're thinking of young quarterbacks, you really try to get their foundations stable. You want them to be on platform, on base, making their throws. And then as they develop, you kind of hope they can make these off balance throws, downfield throws in key moments. And like he showed up the opposite. Like I still don't think I've seen him throw many passes on balance in a game last year because he's just kind of jumping around. But he has a knack, especially on those downfield throws, of putting it in a really good spot for the receivers. Like that's crazy. And then now he's been developing and learning the offense more. I think the second year in the Napier offense will serve him very well. And so then you get into the intangibles and you look at who he is. I think largely from the family he comes from, he's a wonderful young man. He's very polite. He's very loyal. I mean, you talk about somebody that I'm sure could have picked up a lot more money going somewhere else as the hottest name, and yet he's very faithful to the program and to Coach Napier. And so I mean, we couldn't be more thrilled. I couldn't be more thrilled about DJ Lagway. There's like everybody, I think you've got 3 or maybe 4 non-contact injuries in the last year that make you concerned. And then also, I think we as fans should be expecting, no matter who your quarterback is, they're not going to be able to probably play 12 plus games without missing a few quarters or more.
Sure.
So I think we need to rally behind whoever is going to be that backup. I think there's some good options there, and whoever that is, I just encourage the Gator Nation, if and when that person gets their shot, to be as positive and supportive as possible.
If you could give DJ one piece of advice about carrying the weight of being the guy at Florida, what would it be?
I would tell him, make sure you have a close friend or family in your life, that person that really doesn't care about football. Like, have a relationship with someone where you can interact, where it's not just football. I've been very blessed at different points to have that, and it's such a refreshing perspective. 'Cause no matter how wonderful of people you're around, if everything is about one thing, I just don't think that's the most healthy for a psyche. And again, for me to be continually reminded that was more to life than football,
Yeah.
while I was playing Peyton Manning, while like I'm going to New York for the Heisman Trophy, and to have those voices or those experiences of people that are reminding you that there's so much more to life than this right now, I think can be very helpful.
As someone who lived the experience of being the face of Florida football, what do you think Lagway needs most from his coaches, his teammates, and even, Gator Nation as a whole to be able to thrive in this role?
That's good. I mean, Coach Spurrier had some interesting tactics in that he like actually downplayed it, and that kind of going into my senior year and junior year, like we didn't have a Heisman campaign. There wasn't like PR things towards that. It was like, no, run the play and score the touchdown, and we'll figure that out later. So I think the coaches and stuff, but I mean, it's this day and age, man. I mean, he's every day I'm looking on social media, there's a new commercial with him, and now Walter Clayton and Chipotle and the Beats headphones. Like, I mean, he is a superstar, but I do think his upbringing, his family, I think he's up for it. I think that he is so also driven to the actual details of being a successful quarterback, that the best thing you can do when there's pressure and when there's hype is be focused on something else. So, if you're back there getting ready to throw, and you're worried about throwing an interception, or you're worried about this, or, you're worried about it's a Wednesday and you're worried about social media, like the best thing you can do is like, what's the next play? Like, what if this linebacker goes here? Where am I throwing the ball? Like, what's the schedule for tomorrow's practice? And is there a script I can look at? So, and he is a incredible student of the game. I think he's obsessed with all those things. And so I think that is the part of the key of dealing with pressure.
Many people know you for your Heisman and the national title and your football life, but your work after football really honestly has been even more meaningful than anything that you ever did on the football field. What motivated you to dedicate your life to service and humanitarian efforts?
Oh, thank you for asking that. I think my faith clearly played a big role in that. I mean, when I graduated from Florida, I was drafted by the Saints, but my mindset was, I know I'm professionally, vocationally going there to play football, but like, what's the deeper reason why I'm here? Like, what is God doing? What can I be a part of? And so that's what led me to the work at Desire Street, which at the time was in New Orleans, and now we're working all over the country. And so I think it was my faith. I think that the people and the influence in my life kind of led me in that direction. And I just get so much joy out of that. I believe life's not about you. I think if you're trying to create a narrative of your life where you're like the main character, it's usually a pretty boring story. But when you see the bigger picture and see you can be part of a team, or maybe a part, the supporting actor in a bigger play, you get to be a part of some pretty fantastic stories and exciting stuff. And so I just all the time I'm just finding so much joy in what we do, even though it's hard. Like, there's so many difficult things going on, but to see lives change, to see people be impacted, that really is exciting for me.
What does a day in the life of Danny look like now with your foundation and Desire Street Ministries?
One of the things I love about my life now is there's no one day that looks the same. Um, kind of my life's probably kind of torn between like a day in Atlanta where I'm home working or on the road traveling. And, the traveling could look like a lot of different things. I may be speaking somewhere, or I may be meeting with a different ministry group or a leader, or we might be doing a training or a retreat, or it could be a number of things. And now with football season coming up, probably being in Gainesville a bit more, especially on the weekends.
Yeah.
When I'm home, I try to make a strong practice of being with the kids in the morning. Now it's just our daughter, and we do a little devotion, and she leaves. And I try to sit on our porch for almost an hour and just sort of pray, meditate, centering prayer, mindfulness, read some scriptures. And if I can get an hour in doing that, I feel like I am ready for the day and focused and centered. I'll usually, if I can, start working on the porch. We do most of our admin work virtually in meetings and so forth. And then, we'll, these days now, kind of later towards the afternoon, I'm trying to break away and play a lot of pickleball. That's
Okay.
my new favorite love. I'm a bit addicted to that. It's my well, I shouldn't say this on a football podcast to the Gator Nation, but I literally love playing pickleball as much as anything else I've ever done athletically. It's just so fun, and you don't, get hurt, and people don't land on you. And so I'm doing that and loving that as well. And so yeah, it's a good bit of fundraising, a lot of phone calls, a lot of Zooms. We've got two different staffs that we manage. So that's all the different board meetings. And then we're in the middle of planning the next 5 years for Desire Street. So it's kind of a combination of a lot of things, and I love it.
How has working alongside underserved communities shaped your perspective on success compared to what you thought it was when you were on the football field?
Oh, man. Um, well, yeah, success is a real interesting word, and you can define that in a lot of different ways. A lot of people, Tim Tebow's done a great job of talking about what's the difference between success and significance.
Mhm.
And, I think we want to be excellent in whatever we're doing, whatever your profession, whether you're a parent, raising your kids, or whatever. You want to be excellent and do that. And kind of success, I think, is whatever those things are, being the best you can be. But some would define significance as like, what are you doing for others?
Mhm.
And so I think that just the sense um, that we get to care for others. And I actually just totally talked myself to where I forgot your question. I was going somewhere. Say it one more time.
I just said that working along these underserved communities,
Yeah.
has it shaped what you think success is now?
Yes. So I think one, this idea of significance of serving others, but like I really think that there's this idea, like if you're going to go help someone that's poor, or someone that lives in an under-resourced neighborhood, or if you're going to travel to another country and help someone, there's this sense that we've got it together,
Mhm.
and we're going to go help someone. And there's a sense that that might be true. But in other senses, they have some things more together than you do if you're willing to admit it. And the neighborhood care, like what it means to be a neighbor, I've seen neighbors that are very poor live that out so much better than me and other people. The ability to be generous. There's a story in the Bible where these people were given a lot of money, and then this poor woman gave this one coin, and Jesus is like, she gave more than them because she gave all she had. And you just see people that are so generous that have so little is so inspiring. And I mentioned resilience too, kind of on the football field. But I found it's a lot easier to get hit physically and get up and keep going than some of the hits that life give you. And to see people that have just life keeps hammering them, and yet there's faith and hope and joy, has been super inspiring to me. And so somewhere in that is this answer to the things that I've learned and grown working with people through Desire Street.
You from the surface, I mean, you might not feel like this internally, but you really seem to have found your identity after sports, and your calling and your purpose after you hung up your cleats. But that's something that's really incredibly difficult for athletes. I used to tell my husband, like, you're not Peter Pan, time to grow up now, and I think we see that so often in athletes. What advice would you give to current players about preparing to use their platform for something bigger than themselves once their time on the field is over?
Well, I think that you can do two things at the same time. And I think I would encourage anybody to, while you're still playing, spend some time and energy towards what you might be doing afterwards. And I think that's an incredible, valuable lesson. I really want to applaud the Gator Made program and Savannah there. Just the work that they're doing, I think, is as good or better than anybody in the country. So, we may not know who the third team offensive left guard is, but I guarantee you she does. And she's helping develop him for his life after football. And you really, no matter what anyone tells you, you just don't ever think it's going to end.
Mhm.
You just kind of don't. But for most people, it ended after high school, and then a few people get lucky and get to play a little longer in college, and then a few people go to the NFL. And but the reality is that day is coming, and anything you can do beforehand to prepare for options, I think, is important. But the other thing, and this goes back to your question a little bit about faith and how that has impacted my life, but like so many of us had our entire identity based on being a football player. And that's crushing when all of a sudden that's gone. It's almost like you don't matter. People don't laugh at your jokes. You don't get invited places. Like there's just this a very strong, difficult thing to go through. I've done some work with wounded warriors,
Mhm.
and there's a very similar thing, and maybe worse, where these guys were part of a mission bigger than themselves. They're part of a team. They've got their buddies. They're just out there, and then all of a sudden, something happens. They get hurt, and they lose it all.
Yeah.
And it's a very difficult transition. And so I think, how can you invest? Who's mentoring you? Do you have a faith tradition that you're moving towards that reminds you, even when you're running on that field at Florida and those fans are screaming your name, and whether it's DJ or Wuerffel or Go Gators, whatever it is, that life's bigger than that. The sooner we can start learning that, the better.
All right, last question for you. You have turned leadership and faith into action through Desire Street, through your foundation. So, when you think about your legacy, what do you hope people remember the very most about you?
Um, well, to the longer version, or the slightly longer version would be, the mission kind of my life is inspiring service and unity in the world. So that's through the foundation, through Desire Street, through all the things that we're doing. So, hopefully people would somehow in there see somebody that was inspired them and moved them to be a little less selfish and care for other people more. Um, and the simple kind of the more this is more of a private mission statement because I'm come off as humble. Sometimes I'm probably more authentically humble than, and sometimes I'm more probably faking it. So there's kind of that's my own internal story. But like, I also want to beat your butt if we're playing in something. So kind of my untold mission statement is kick butt, be humble, serve others. So somewhere in there, maybe I'll be remembered.
I love it. Well, I will tell you my dad and my grandfather played at Florida and my husband and my brother, and when we were little, there's 7 of us. There's 7 kids in the Peak family. And my dad would bring us up to every home game and he would leave my mom at home, and I think that like she didn't love football, but also it was a good opportunity to kind of give the mom of 7 a day to, have to herself.
Yeah.
But when you were quarterback of Florida, she came to every game because she wanted my brothers to see you as a role model, and she saw you as a role model for us kids. And they had the December after we won a national title, my parents had twins and they named my brother Daniel after you. But you are literally the only time in my parents 40-year marriage that my mom actually agreed to sit in the stands game after game. So
All
you
right.
definitely inspired some non-football lovers
That's a great honor. Thanks for sharing that.
along the way. Tell Gator Nation is huge, and they want to get involved in the things that um, you know are players that are spreading good around the world. How, if a fan wanted to get involved with Desire Street or your foundation, where can they go to find out more information?
Yeah, I mean, if you just go dannywuerffel.com, the hardest part is spelling my last name, but you did that correctly there on the screen. So you or TJ in the background, who knows? But definitely that's a good place to start. You can Google Desire Street to learn more. And, we're 2 days away, as we're at least filming this, from the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. And yeah, that brings back a lot of memories. And there's a lot of things in our story. We lost everything we owned, my family, my wife and I. And the ministry was totally underwater and ruined. And so we've kind of rebuilt everything, which is pretty amazing. But desirestreet.org and then, Wuerffel Foundation. But yeah, just anything Danny Wuerffel, you should be able to find what we're doing and appreciate that.
All right. Well, we appreciate you giving us all this time. This has been wonderful. Have a wonderful rest of your day and go Gators.
Go Gators.